Hi, this is LGBTQ&A, where we get to know different members of the LGBTQ community. I'm Jeffrey Masters, and I'm here today with NiK Kacy. NiK is the creator of one of the first and only gender-neutral luxury shoewear companies. Stay tuned. Hey, NiK.
Hello, Jeffrey.
Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
Cool, thank you. I'm excited to chat. To chat about NiK Kacy footwear, NiK Kacy shoes. Is it just NiK Kacy, the name?
It started off as just NiK Kacy because I wanted the brand to be much more like an umbrella for many things that I want to do, but I decided to add the footwear because I realized that people won't necessarily get what it is at first.
Fantastic.
So, but it won't be the only thing that we do.
Awesome. And I just want to be clear that I'm asking the name of the company, not your name.
Right,
I know your name.
No, I go by NiK Kacy footwear now.
That's so funny. So you created the company specifically to solve a problem that you had.
Right.
That you could not find shoes in your size. Is that right?
Yeah. So my whole life, like walking down the street, I seeing guys like with these awesome shoes that I love, and never being able to find them in my size, or being told constantly like go to the women's section, or this is not for you, and just feeling very like, I don't know, ignored, like underrepresented and dismissed, you know. So I always had told myself like, one day if no one's gonna do this, I'm gonna make my own shoes. But decades went by because you get into life and paying the bills and things like that, and then finally, like 3 years ago, I had an opportunity to kind of like reevaluate where I want to be in life, and I realized like there's this bucket list of things that I always wanted to do, and this was one of them.
I guess I'm just so surprised too because fashion is moving so much more towards like androgynous looks,
Right.
And then you can buy almost anything online. I just assumed that this would have existed.
Yeah, me too. I was, constantly, like even in the past 10 years, just really surprised that with the advent of like online shopping, that even when I would buy shoes online that said it was my size, it would still not fit well.
Wow.
So I'd always have to like double up on socks or insoles, and that's not very healthy for you. So
Yeah, I mean, like shoes are just like so important
Right.
too.
Yeah, it's the one thing that carries your entire body weight. It's the one thing that affects your posture, your back, like everything is related. And it's very surprising that, number one, there's a lot of poor quality shoes that are made out there. We live in a very disposable kind of product society, so they condition us to think like, oh, every season you have to get a new something, and then it's out of style now, after you blinked,
Yeah.
and so so I want to change that mentality.
Yeah, and the shoes they're beautiful.
Thank you.
They're very classic and timeless. As you said, they're not disposable. Does that create an issue though? Because people are not like buying multiple pairs. They're like buying them and keeping them
Right. Well,
for a while.
surprisingly, like I think first of all, like a lot of my customers, who many of them actually have become friends because they're so passionate about what I'm doing, and they like once they start wearing my shoes, they love it so much, and we start having a conversation. And I'm constantly like trying to get feedback as well, because with every production I want to improve upon what I'm doing, and I'm always surprised because I know it's such an investment, but once they love it, like they're like, okay, I'm saving up for my next pair and the next pair. Like I have multiple like customers who have more than like 3-4 pairs already.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah. I guess that's when it's a good idea, where you tell people about it and they're like, wait, that doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah.
Like, how can that be?
Right.
That's so funny. So you created this to solve a problem, but do you also just like love shoes?
I do. I do love shoes. There are very few things that I'm a collector of, and shoes, sunglasses, and watches were like my 3 big things.
Oh, really?
So I maybe one day will start moving into designing those things because I love it.
Yeah.
But I'm a firm believer in like I have to love what I do and I have to be passionate about it, or otherwise it's not really worth doing.
How do you how many shoes do you own? Can you like give me a rough estimate?
Because of what I'm doing now, I've actually donated a lot already.
Oh, wow.
Because one, I don't have room, and then two, I realize, I don't need all of them. So I have a very strict policy. Like if I don't wear this on a regular basis, it's donated.
Gotcha.
And so I donate to the LGBT Center in LA for their youth center.
And they specifically use that stuff for like homeless youth, but also to help them to have like more presentable clothes for like job interviews, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a big part of what I believe in. Like my brand will kind of like work towards every year is like with our new collection. I believe that every year when I have a new collection, I want to donate a certain amount for their wardrobe and for their programs with their youth, so that it gives them incentive to like maybe complete like their diploma or like some sort of work project, or like something to kind of reward them for their hard work. And then in addition to that is they have a closet for like professional interviews or school like graduation, important events that I think it's really important for them to have access to clothing, because it's such a big part of like how they feel about themselves and that building that confidence. And so a lot of us really like donate to it every year on a regular basis, so that it replenishes that wardrobe.
Yeah, I'm glad you're mentioning that, because until a couple of years ago, I even would just take all my stuff to Goodwill.
Right.
But like this is so useful and like a need for like people who want to like help out in the community. This is like an easy thing you can do with stuff you are not using.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, the center does so much for the youth, and there's so many LGBTQ youth that gets kind of tossed out of their families because of their identity and their sexuality. And so the center really provides them with the resources. And I think, clothing is one of those things where we take it for granted because we just have it, right? And so when you think about these kids who don't have, number one, access to clothing because they can't afford it, and then number two is access to clothing that is representational of their identity, right? So to be able to donate that and provide them with that, it's it's really amazing. It's not really anything off our backs.
Yeah,
literally.
Exactly. Yeah. You also volunteer there as well.
Yeah.
What do you do there?
Well, I used to volunteer like at LifeWorks, where we would like do team sports with a lot of the girls there. In recent years, I'm more of like on the committee for an evening with women, and working on projects that are a little bit like with Lawn, which is the LA Women's Network, and less like actually like they're volunteering with the kids, which is something I would love to do. And I'm talking about like doing that again as I find more time, because I really love that interaction and to be able to, like be a mentor,
Yeah.
But Evening with Women is one of like my biggest favorite events of the year, where we've had like Sia, Gwen Stefani, Ozzy Osbourne, Mia Jovovich like perform.
Those are huge names.
Yeah, those are huge names, and it's like at the Palladium, so it's like a pretty small venue. So it's so intimate. You sit down with dinner, full bar, and then you have like live auctions, silent auctions, and all of the proceeds goes towards the women and girl services at the center, which is really like the only event of the year that puts money towards those specific, resources.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really passionately involved in that.
I have to ask, just because you are gender fluid and you designed like gender neutral shoes, it's an evening for women.
Right.
Is it exclusive to women?
No.
Or okay.
Yeah. So really, like when it's like an evening with women, it's kind of like I don't know what the word is, but like it's because the proceeds goes towards the women and girl services.
Gotcha.
But obviously, we want anyone who is an ally in the belief in protecting women and girls that contribute.
I'm thinking more in terms of like helping like non-binary kids as well.
Yeah.
Is that like with okay?
Exactly.
That's
I guess
umbrella.
yeah. So because like there's like health services, there's legal services, so many different services that they have.
Yeah.
But the budgets, I guess, that are involved is they're restricted per whether it's like medication or whatever. But in terms of like for women, like for female services or anything that's falling in that umbrella, then this particular event kind of brings in the money for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And this year it's May 13th.
Oh, that's coming
So
up.
yeah, so please buy tickets.
Do you know who's going to do it yet? Like
We don't know yet.
name-wise?
No,
Okay.
no.
Do you know, but you can't tell me?
I don't know yet. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about the shoes. Going back to them. From like idea to like physical product in your hand, there's many steps.
Oh yeah.
Where did you start?
Well, my background is actually not in fashion design, so for me it really was just like going out. I left my job at Google, and
What were you doing there?
I was a producer.
Video?
Video, everything.
Oh, wow.
Online, everything, yeah. And I was a producer for the past, I don't know, 12 years. So I guess for me, it's like I had the skill set to basically like I can produce anything.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
that I'm sure it's not that different.
Yeah, it's like, the skill set is pretty much the same. Like anything you want to produce is just like kind of that same model, right, of how you want to do it.
Yeah, when I got to LA originally, I was like, so like, what does that mean, producer? And like, you keep finding out more things.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
expanding always.
Yeah, and then because I've been in the advertising industry for over 20 years, I guess like I've produced so many things that now I kind of know the general idea of like, you can give me anything, I can produce it.
Yeah.
So when it came to shoes, I was like, as long as I have a passion for it and I believe in something, I believe I can do it.
Yeah.
Right? So I quit my job and then I went traveling in Europe for 9 weeks by myself, and I just like went to all these like shoe fairs. I went to tanneries. I met with shoemakers, all the different resources that make basically a shoe possible.
Yeah.
And I asked them like, number one is like, why aren't you making these type of shoes? And then two, it was like, how do I go about doing it? So the first answer was basically like, oh yeah, we know there's this need, but we don't think it's worth doing because it's like such a small population.
Huh.
And so that immediately set me off because I was like, so you're just basically telling me my community doesn't matter. It's not enough money for you, right? Because for these big shoe companies, like they already make so many, like they make tens and hundreds of thousands of shoes per year, right? For them to add on this like small size range would cost them probably nothing. Whereas for me to go in without any kind of background, any kind of resources to do an entire 14 size range is like humongous, like in terms of investments, capital, like to make all of the lasts,
And you're starting from scratch.
and I'm starting from scratch, right? And so it always bewilders me like why they don't just do it, because they know there's a need. And even if the profit margin for them is smaller, it's still worth it. You know what I mean? And that's what really, I guess, pisses me off, is that it's so much about money for them and the bottom line, and not enough about the humanity of it, And so I just decided that, I'm just going to do this myself, and hopefully my community will back me because they believe in the need,
Yeah.
and that it's more than about money. So,
It seems like it so far.
Yeah.
When you were traveling around Europe and talking to people, were they like receptive?
It was hard. It was very challenging because at first, even now, like every time I talk to anybody in the shoe industry, it's like, no, that's not how we make a shoe. It has to be a woman or a man's. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. Like all it has to do is it has to fit you right.
Yeah.
Right. And even when you have a woman's shoe or a man's shoe, it still doesn't necessarily fit everybody, because at the end of the day, every human being, nobody's feet's the same, right? Like you can have a bunion, it'll change everything. So everyone's arch is different. I mean, it's like your thumbprint. Everyone's is different. So the fact that they're trying so hard to be like, well, it has to be a man or a woman's, it was really hard for me to like break through that, barrier for them. And but eventually, that, with time, trying to explain it to them, a lot of it had to be like, well, maybe I'm wrong, but just try it.
Yeah.
I'm paying for it, so why do you care? Just do it, And so finally, after they do it, and then after they see the end result, they're like, oh, okay. It's like something else clicks, and they're like, okay, this wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be,
Yeah. So I guess it sounds like, as we know, like our society is very gendered.
Yeah.
And but historically, shoes are some of like the oldest things we've have.
Right.
And I guess from like the hundreds and thousands of years ago, they've been
Yeah.
making women's and men's shoes.
Right.
It's just in culture.
Right. But the irony of it is like men actually started wearing heels first. So like if you go back into like
So like Victorian times.
exactly like King Louis, like I mean,
Yeah.
you look at some of these photos and like the wealthy, rich, like white men were wearing high heels, and it wasn't until later I think that more and more women started catching on to that. But back then it was like really about stature. Like the high heels I think came from the shorter men wanting to be taller,
Yeah.
And so I think it's so funny now when I go in and I'm trying to, like, recently I've been trying to make high heels in the same size range.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so what that means is that I'm going to be making a high heel in, like, a men's 14, right? And so a lot of times the reaction I get from the shoemakers or the manufacturers, they're like, oh no, we don't do that. And it's this like hidden homophobia that they're not willing to acknowledge that why they don't want to do it, but they're like, that's just not what we do. And so
Because there's actually not like any kind of reason why it's not possible with like their machinery, right?
yeah, it's totally possible.
It's just a bigger shoe.
Yeah, it's a bigger shoe, and maybe they might have to invest in a little bit more money in terms of like creating soles or like creating heels that could support that kind of height and weight. But it's really not like it's impossible. It's just that the first run will be the most challenging, right?
Yeah.
But once you do it, the way I sell it is like you could be like part of this movement, like you can be part of this revolution, and I'm sure that once we do this and it takes off, this is going to be an ongoing thing, But I think is the lack of belief that this will become something, and so that's why it's really important for me with what I do right now, with what I have out, is having people support and show that there's growth.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, a lot of these manufacturers, they don't want to even try it.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And my first thought with the heels was, oh, there's such a massive market for drag queens, but like that's performance, and like when it comes to like gender,
Right.
Even people who are like not gender, everyone is gender non-conforming in some ways,
right.
and I see like non-trans people so much more happy to wear heels out for a night, just for fun.
Yeah.
Like, where everyone's more experimenting more with that.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal right now. And I think culturally we're in a place in our time, in our lives, that there is a lot more experimentation, a lot more openness, and the whole term I think of gender neutrality and like androgyny has like created this perception that like, oh, I don't have to conform to a particular style
Exactly.
based on my identity or my gender. And so like with what I'm doing, and I think a lot of times people miss this kind of key concept, is the long-term goal is by creating a gender equal shoe, and it's not even just a gender neutral shoe, it's an actual gender equal shoe, because the last, which is the mold of the shoe, is designed to fit both men and women and everything in between, right? So it's no longer separated by this idea of like a male last or a female last.
And what is a last?
A last is basically the form of the shoe.
Okay.
Right, so that's how they like create the shape of the shoe.
Yeah.
And so I went in there, and there's actual people who are experts in making, like, designing the last, and I went in and I kind of changed that design and I made it into something I believe was gender equal. And I think my goal is that if I have people, like my first collection, the Fortune collection, is more masculine presenting, right? That's because that's what I knew.
Yeah.
That's the type of shoe that I've always wanted to wear, so I want to start with what I know. But the goal is that, first we have everybody, regardless of gender, and everyone in that gender spectrum, feel comfortable wearing something that's, masculine presenting, but changing the concept of what's masculine presenting and realizing that the shoe is not masculine presenting, right? The shoe is a certain type of design. However you feel and identify with yourself, that's how you match that style.
Yeah.
Right? So you could be masculine presenting, you can be feminine presenting, you could be cisgendered or transgendered or whatever. But that style, if you feel, an attraction to that style, and that's how you want to represent yourself or express yourself today, then you should be able to, and it should fit you, And then from there, the second collection that I'm going to be coming out with is more androgynous. So it's the absence of actual gender in the design. And so what the goal is that then I have people who are now starting to be comfortable breaking away from what society has conditioned us to think how shoes should fit us, and how shoes should look. Because traditionally men's shoes look, bigger and longer and wider, and then women's shoes make your feet look like they're like little tiny baby feet, right? And because that was what was considered feminine. So with this next, collection is basically getting everybody to be like, screw all of that. Now it's just like this is a sexy silhouette of a shoe that is going to match however you want to match it. And so therefore now you're expressing yourself in a way that is even farther away from any kind of gender. And then finally, the final step for me will be starting the high heels, which is kind of taking it one step further. Okay, now that you're comfortable with having zero kind of gender identity, and how you express yourself is really completely about style, and not about any kind of gender. Now you can feel like, oh, these high heels look really awesome too, and maybe I might try that. And stop thinking about high heels as like a woman's shoe or even a drag queen. Like, it's not about that. It's about like, it's sexy and it's, attractive, or it complements your outfit well. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I want people to start thinking.
This is very deep, thought out.
Yeah.
No, it's amazing. Do you think that we are heading towards in 100 years where clothing stores will sell clothes and it won't be split up by gender?
I hope that it's less than 100 years.
Really?
Yeah. I'm hoping that it's going to be like 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fast.
I hope. Well, I feel like things, they move in a very kind of like the trajectory of how things move, like how progress is like exponentially, like always faster, right? So.
Yeah. You said can you explain the difference for me between gender equal and gender neutral to you?
Yes. So there's a lot of, I think, misconception because a lot of people say like gender neutral fashion, gender neutral this and that. And for me, I think gender neutral just means like it could be this or that, right? It's neutral. But for me, gender equal means that it's inclusive of all genders, so that, if you think about shoes traditionally, men's shoes are comfortable, they're better quality, they last longer, and they're usually like, they don't cost you an arm and a leg, right? Women's shoes are traditionally like made in lesser quality because they're not meant to last you for a very long time because they want you to buy new ones very soon, but they also charge you a lot, right? But you never actually get to pay for the quality, I think. So gender equality goes beyond just the look for me. It just also means that you're, no matter what gender you are, you're paying the same, you're getting the same comfort, you're getting, everything is equal.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's my concept of gender equality. Goes, I'm starting with one step at a time, literally, with a pair of shoes, and I want to move towards everything, because if you and I start buying the same kind of shoes, and then, we're buying the same kind of shirts, and we're buying all the same things for the same prices, hopefully you're going to start thinking, hey, why is NiK not getting paid the same, right? And so it is very deep for me, because it's not just about fashion. It's about our whole society and how we can reach gender equality. It's what's my part in this life, in this world, and how I can help us get there.
Yeah. You're like leading the resistance.
Well, I'm one of like
adding to the resistance.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that less pressure?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just laughing because I looked down and I'm wearing nail polish. Mm-hmm. I think everyone is like more relaxing into their gender and like how like confined it is.
Right.
And the stress of it.
Yeah.
You said this current collection is called Future.
No. Fortune was the first collection. The new collection's called Destiny.
Destiny.
Yeah.
Is there a name for the third one?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever have to change the design for like financial reasons? That if you do XYZ, it'll just be an astronomically expensive shoe?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So, for example, for the second collection, I've moved to Mexico because I didn't want to compromise on the quality of the shoe and the materials I want to use. So one way to save costs was moving it to Mexico and finding a small enough factory that can keep the quality that I want, but because I don't have to pay duties, at least for now, that helps saves cost.
Oh, wow.
So shipping is also less because it's closer. So my first collection was in Portugal, and it killed me to ship because it's all air shipped. I'm not like boat shipping because that would take forever. and then also the duties. So it costs so much, and people, they're like, oh, why are these shoes so expensive? It's like, well, besides the fact that you're paying for the quality, you're also paying for the fact that I'm a small little person in a small little company that is basically air shipping 300 pairs of shoes over.
Wow.
So so I always put quality first, and so I'm very reluctant to change design to fit my cost.
Yeah.
I try to find other ways first, in fact, I feel like the irony is I moved to Mexico, but instead I took all the money I was going to save, and I'm using even better materials and better quality stuff, because I was like, I can,
Yeah.
So in a way I ended up I'm going to end up keeping the cost about the same, but I'm hoping that people will realize they're actually going to pay about the same as the first collection, but they're going to get an even better product.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just know that on my leather boots I have, there's a swath of canvas on the side, and that has to just be for cost, right? I just figured when it's like an 8x8 chunk, that's just a cheaper shoe than putting leather there. Or is that not
They
correct?
just put a canvas?
Yeah, it's it's built in to make it look like it's a design choice.
Oh.
But I just think it would have been more expensive with that being leather. Is that not correct?
That is true.
Okay.
Because leather obviously is more expensive, but it's hard to make assumptions in terms of if that was a design change for cost, or maybe that was because they did studies and it showed that maybe canvas was hot.
Oh, interesting.
You never know, right?
Oh, because the texture. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I do have hot feet, so that's good.
Yeah. Especially for summer, maybe people don't want to wear all leather. I personally wear leather all the time.
Yeah.
All year long. So, but I think leather to me it's basically our skin, right? So it's just it's a porous material. It's breathable. I think it's one of the healthiest things you can wear. I just don't agree with how certain leather industries treat the animals.
Yeah.
But that's not, I'm very particular about which industry I use and which sources that I use. So to me, that's me doing my part.
Huge. And to stereotype, there are a lot of queer and trans people who are vegan.
Yes.
Do you have any products for that? And is there a good leather alternative?
I have been working on this for over a year now, because there is a lot of people who, constantly reach out to me, be like, I love your designs. I would love to wear your stuff, but...
Yeah, a lot in our community.
Yeah, and also, because I try to be very inclusive, I want to create products for everybody, right? But in my research and also just in my experience, I have yet to find a leather alternative that I find to be ecological and healthy for our bodies. Especially the cheaper shoes, actually, that exist, they're all synthetic. But what we don't realize is that the synthetic materials that are being used are all chemical laced. It's horrible it's worse for the environment when they make these faux leathers than it is for us to just wear leather.
Wow.
On top of that, there's a lot of material, the chemicals in the synthetic materials that, when our feet sweat, right? It's very porous. We have a lot of pores in our feet. And so when we're sweating, all these chemicals are being absorbed into our bodies that we don't even realize. So I'm not going there. So I've been researching mushroom leather and pineapple leather. Those are two new leathers that are out that I think are amazing, but I have yet to have the product in my hand to test. So until I get to actually test it, and I'm very stringent on my testing, that I'm not gonna go outside of leather until I find something.
Now, pineapple leather, is that from the stalk, the tree?
Yeah, so
Wow.
It's they recycle the vegetation part of it, and then they make this amazing leather that, from the video, looks so good, right? It looks really nice.
I'm kind of amazed at the level of detail.
Yeah.
Not that the level of detail that but the level of detail that exists for shoes. These things that we've been wearing all our lives and don't think about.
Right.
Were you surprised by the number of variations and changes of shoes?
Oh yeah, I think after my first year into it, even now, when I talk to certain people, my mom was here recently for a month, and I introduced her to a lot of people that I work with, and mentors and stuff like that. And all of them like are like, we don't know why Nick got into the shoe industry. It's like the worst industry, you know, because you don't realize how detailed it is. And explaining to my mom, like, when you look at a pair of shoes, like I have a lot of customers who are like, oh, why is it taking so long? And what people don't realize is that because I'm creating a custom, like a new thing, everything has to be newly made, right? It's not like a normal, like if you order a size 12, like it's just already gonna be there, like every part of it, because it's already been made. For me, every part of what I make has to be newly made by all the different resources. And when you talk about, say, a pair of boots, like the welt around the sole, somebody makes that. The actual outsole at the bottom, somebody makes that. The heel that goes on top of that, somebody makes that, right? And then you've got the insole and the midsole. Somebody all makes that stuff. And so
Are these people all in the same location though?
sometimes and sometimes not, because you know, also the people I like to hire to work for me is like, I want them to be absolute experts in what they do. So sometimes it's like going to a restaurant. You don't want to eat at like a Mexican Japanese place, right? Like because they're maybe not experts in Mexican or Japanese food, right?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of mentality of philosophy that I have. Like, I want to make sure I work with people who are absolute experts in what they do. So if they are sole makers, then they make soles only, right?
Wow.
They're not also making like shoelaces, right?
So how did you find these people to begin with?
So it took a long time. Like, so for the first year after I quit my job was just basically like meeting people, talking to people. First of all, not everybody wants to work with me because they don't know me, number one, and I'm nobody. Like I'm no brand that they know, and they don't know that I'll be around for very long. So nobody wants to invest. So it's really like, number one, convincing them what I am doing is something big,
Yeah.
right? And then number two is I might not want to work with all of them, you know, like maybe not every one of them are like the best shoemakers, right? So I have to be picky. So now we're both picky, right? So like you keep narrowing down until this funnel of like maybe finally like a handful of people who want to work with you and that you want to work with. And then from there, I had them make samples. And once I made a bunch of samples, like in Italy, in Portugal, in Spain, then from there I could see like, oh, you know, the guys in Portugal understood what I was doing. And so they made a sample that actually looks like what I want. Whereas like the guys in Italy, they were a little bit more like chauvinistic. So they were kind of like, you don't know what you're talking about. So they just went ahead and like made whatever they thought was right, which wasn't what I wanted. You know, and also the quality, what I realized was like it costs so much more to make over there versus Portugal, but the quality at the Portugal factory was actually much better for me. So
And now the factory's in Mexico though.
yeah, so I have both. So like the
Oh.
first collection I'm still gonna do in Portugal, and then the second collection I'm gonna do in Mexico.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it? I didn't see it, but is it online or on the website? Like how intricate this is, and how like the level of detail?
No, and that's something I realized that I need to start, I guess, communicating because people don't realize, and so I think if I maybe explained it more, maybe people would be a little bit more supportive.
Yeah.
And understand.
I just think like you said, like they are a higher price point of
Yeah.
shoe. But hearing about all this, it's like, so that's what this is paying for.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just good quality, but like the good treatment of people and
Yes.
like the leather and the animals.
Yes.
Like that is insane.
Yeah, yeah, and you know it's funny because I have a neighbor who is like I think third generation shoemaker, and when he saw my shoes, he was like, Nick, these could be at Nordstrom for like $700-800. You know, he's like, you're undercharging, and so that made me feel really good because that I knew I could trust his opinion.
Oh wow.
You know, and the fact is, like, right now, I'm trying to make it as accessible for people as possible because I'm just starting. And I also know people in our community don't make as much money, particularly the women, you know, so, like the trans and women. But, you know, eventually what I'd like to do is as we, increase our production, as we grow, and we can, like, maybe produce more per order, then our cost will drop. And then I'll be able to like pass that on to my customers.
Wow.
And eventually maybe I'll even do like maybe a knockoff of my own line that is maybe, you know, where I do cut on like certain type of materials to make it really accessible for other people, you know.
Wow.
But that's something I'm still torn about because I'm not like even the way I shop is like I always buy quality. I don't buy quantity, And I think that that's not only just about spending, but it's also about like ecology. Like how are we impacting our earth? If we're always buying quantity, then we're also creating more waste, and being more disposal. Like, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I think that for us, like creating a higher quality product also means that we don't have to acquire as much. We have stuff that lasts longer.
Yeah. But before this interview, I was thinking about how much of like time and energy you spend in terms of design and product, and how much time and energy in terms of business and like getting it. But it sounds, talking to you, like that's really, really interwoven all together.
Yeah, and I'm a one-man show, so like I do everything pretty much myself. And I've been very blessed that I have such a amazing group of friends who are very talented. So if I need a photo shoot or if I need a model here and there, like everyone's always eager to be like, how can we help?
Wow.
But other than that, like I really do everything myself. And so sometimes it is very overwhelming. And I keep saying like I would love an intern, anyone who's like really passionate about not just what I'm doing, but why I'm doing it. Like I could use the help. But it is really hard because it's all like here,
Yeah.
Everything I do is all about right here and here. So it's hard to be able to like kind of let go.
Fascinating. Remind me after. I think I have an idea for an intern.
Okay.
For something, but it's through the Point Foundation. I have a lot of friends there, and they have all like college students.
Awesome.
But they're all like Fulbright scholars only.
Wow.
But we can chat.
Perfect.
So if you don't mind me asking, you moved here from Hong Kong when you were 7.
Correct.
I bring this up because immigrants communities can have the stereotype of being less accepting towards anybody who is like trans or gay or anything on the LGBTQ scale. But it sounds like your family was very accepting. Is that correct?
I would say like my mom.
More accepting.
Yeah, like my mom is really kind of like my main family.
Yeah.
And so she was very, very accepting in the sense of like she didn't make a big deal about it when it came out. But for the first 2 years, I think she still was kind of like, "You sure you don't want to try dating a guy?" So she's very accepting, and now she's also grown into this woman that is so open-minded. And I mean, I take her to the Eagle, to the Abbey, and she has a great time.
I ask because I think it's so important to hear these other stories that kind of contradict that.
Right. Yeah, I think that she's a minority in terms of like acceptance, particularly as an Asian woman. But I think in the Asian culture, it's starting to hopefully like become a little bit more open. Like even, I recently told her about like on Netflix, there's like a Taiwanese TV show called Bromance, where it was, a girl was born as a girl, but the fortune teller told her parents that like, oh, if you have a girl, she's going to have a horrible life and she needs to live as a boy for the first 21 years or something like that. But in this story was about this woman who basically had to be, a transvestite, I guess, for the first 21 years of her life.
And not by choice.
Right, not by choice. And so she ends up falling in love with this boy who thinks she's a boy and who's a straight man. And so like it becomes like culturally through this story, the media was trying to train the audience that it's okay for this guy to fall in love with the girl pretending to be a guy, you know? And so I guess they call that like hegemonic negotiation, where the audience is being, I guess, conditioned to think like, this is okay, it's totally acceptable, well, because she's technically a girl, but even though no one else in the show knows, right? But in that transition in the story, everyone else in the family in the story is totally okay with this gay couple. So therefore it teaches the audience like, oh, it's not frowned upon, like it's totally okay.
Thank God for that positive portrayal too, because we like subconsciously train people to like reject all the time in media because it's a dramatic story and that's exciting to watch.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but that's how far I think like Asian culture is coming. Like they're still behind, but they're trying. You can tell they're trying, and that's great. Yeah.
I don't know her name, but there's like in China, like their Oprah is a trans woman.
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. I'm a big fan of hers. I don't remember her name, but like she's huge.
massive followers.
Yeah.
I also recently found or read about Samoa. They have a recognized third gender there.
Yeah.
It's that like island like near Hawaii, but just in the middle of nowhere. And it's like just like normal and accepted.
Yeah.
There's men, women, and it's like fafatini or something.
Right.
But and I'm just fascinated by that because for such a progressive culture to have this recognized third gender, it is for people who are assigned male at birth and then portray male and female characteristics. There's not kind of the alternative for people who are assigned women at birth. So,
Interesting.
yeah, it's interesting that they
yeah.
kind of recognize one but don't acknowledge the other.
Right. I mean, I think like the third gender is in existence for a lot of different cultures around the world, particularly like third world countries, I think, which is very interesting because it feels like for us being more progressive actually is holding us back.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you go back into history, like ancient history was actually much more accepting of third genders than we are now.
Yeah. It's wild. I know I gotta let you go soon, but with your like gender, like I don't want to say evolving, but like figuring it out, coming to terms with it, has that affected like who you're attracted to? Has that changed?
Gosh, I actually haven't thought about that because I've been so busy with my shoes. I haven't even really been thinking about dating. I feel like I have like my babies and like this is my world. I saw the evolution in my designs as I've come into my own identity. And after I transitioned, I recognized that I couldn't just kind of become a trans man, even though I think that it was what I was born as was probably a trans man, right? But I think because I spent the last 30 years of my life really struggling to embrace the feminine side, like being a lesbian, being a part of that community, that finally like the struggle I think was kind of over. Like I grew into it. Like, so when I finally got to be in the body that I was meant to have, I realized that psychologically and mentally in my heart that I had already learned to embrace this other side of me and that it was totally okay, that I didn't need to like put it aside or throw it away just because I transitioned. I actually learned to embrace the fact that now I am even more comfortable in my body because I get the best of both worlds, where I get to be all that encompasses me. And I think that all of us actually have both like the feminine and the masculine, and that we just need to all kind of learn to embrace both sides. And it's not about gender anymore. It's about really the absence of gender, about just how we feel in our hearts, like who we are,
Yeah, I think that's such a nice place to leave it on. Yeah. And I also think that that is such a, like, in parallel with your shoes.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's nice to see that match. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to meet you.
Yeah.
And if people want to find out more about you, they can, just like Twitter, your website. Should we send them to your website?
Yeah, it's www.NiKKacy, NiKKacy.com. And then I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at NiK Kacy Footwear.
Perfect. Thank you. And
Thank you.
I'm on Twitter at JeffMasters1. You can find all of our other interviews on iTunes. And if you want to leave us a comment and subscribe there, we will really, really, really appreciate that. It really helps people find us. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Thank you.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.